The final test chamber was different from all the others. Instead of physical dangers, it was designed to attack the mind itself. The walls were covered with equipment that could create the most realistic simulations ever built. It could make someone believe they were experiencing anything from their worst nightmares to their deepest fears. This was the psychological breaking point test, designed to shatter the will of even the strongest survivors. The simulation was so real, so convincing, that it had driven several council members to temporary madness during its development. It created scenarios of complete helplessness, situations where there was no escape, no hope, no possibility of survival. The human volunteer who entered the chamber was Yoon, a quiet woman who had spoken very little during the previous tests. She walked calmly into the room filled with terrifying equipment and sat down in the center chair. Her expression was peaceful, almost curious as the technicians attached. "The neural interfaces, you understand what this test involves?" Counselor Vexthara asked, her crystal form flickering with uncertainty. "We will place you in situations of absolute despair, scenarios where death is certain, where hope is impossible, where the mind typically breaks under the weight of complete hopelessness," and nodded calmly. "I understand. Please proceed. I am ready." The first scenario began immediately. The simulation placed Yoon in a collapsing building with no way out. The structure was falling apart around her, with debris blocking every exit and fires spreading through the rooms. The air was filling with smoke and the ceiling was about to crush her. The council watched their monitors, expecting to see the usual signs of panic and despair. Instead, Yoon began to examine her surroundings with clinical interest. "Interesting," she said calmly as the building collapsed around her. "The structural damage is concentrated in the support beams, but if I can reach that load-bearing wall and redirect some of the weight, I might be able to create a pocket of stable space." She began to move through the simulation with methodical precision, finding solutions where none should exist. Her stress indicators showed excitement rather than fear, as if the impossible situation was stimulating her problem-solving abilities. "How is this possible?" Dr. Nexel whispered as he watched the readings. "Her brain activity shows patterns of engagement and curiosity, not terror and despair. She is treating this like a puzzle to be solved." The simulation adapted, creating new obstacles faster than Yoon could solve them. But instead of becoming overwhelmed, she simply worked faster. Her mind seemed to accelerate as the challenges increased, turning what should have been paralyzing fear into fuel for greater mental performance. The scenarios became progressively worse. Trapped underground with no air, surrounded by predators with no weapons, facing a deadly plague with no cure. Each situation was designed to be absolutely hopeless, to break the will through the certainty of death. Yoon approached each one like an interesting problem to be analyzed. When faced with no air, she calculated how long she could survive and began working on ways to extend that time. When surrounded by predators, she studied their behavior, looking for weaknesses. When facing plague, she immediately began theorizing about potential treatments. "The simulation is adapting beyond its normal parameters," the technician announced, his voice filled with concern. "It is trying to find a scenario that will break her psychological defenses, but she keeps finding solutions to impossible problems." The final scenario was the cruelest one the council could devise. Yoon was forced to watch helplessly as her entire species was destroyed, being the last human alive in a universe that wanted her dead. It was designed to create absolute despair through the loss of everything she had ever cared about. The council expected this to finally break her instead. Yoon immediately began planning how to rebuild civilization from nothing. "Okay," she said, talking to herself as she worked through the scenario. "I will need to preserve genetic material somehow. Maybe cloning technology. If I can find the right equipment, I should establish sustainable food production and maintain as much technological knowledge as possible. If I can extend my lifespan through medical advances, I might be able to restart the human species." She began working out detailed plans for survival and reconstruction, treating the extinction of her entire species as simply another problem to be solved. Her mind never wavered, never showed despair, never accepted defeat. That was when the screaming started. It began with Counselor Vexthara. Her crystal form produced a sound like mountains of glass shattering as the full realization hit her. These were not just survivors. These were beings that had turned survival itself into an instinct so powerful that they could not be broken by any conceivable force. Counselor Gorth followed with a roar that shook the chamber. His rocky form trembled as he understood that his own world, with its crushing gravity and deadly storms, would be considered a mild vacation, spot by human standards. Counselor Zephia shrieked with terror as she realized that the dangers that had forged her people through millions of years of suffering were the kinds of things humans actively sought out for entertainment. One by one, every member of the council began to scream as the full implications became clear. Humanity was not just another Deathworld species. They were the end result of evolution pushing the concept of survival to its absolute limit. They were what happened when a planet spent millions of years trying to kill a species and failed. Dr. Nexel tried to file his final report, but his hands were shaking too badly to operate the equipment. These beings, he wrote in fragments, do not just survive impossible conditions. They treat impossible conditions as normal. They have weaponized adaptation itself. They are apex predators of apex predators. The screaming continued as more realizations hit. The humans' casual attitude toward danger, their children playing in deadly situations, their sports that involved deliberate injury, their entertainment that featured mortal peril. Everything about them violated the natural order. Clixandra made the final entry in the research logs with appendages that could barely hold. The recording device. Recommendation immediate acceptance into the Deathworld Council, she managed to write. Also formal request that they never consider our worlds as potential tourism destinations. The humans were formally accepted into the council. Within hours, the vote was unanimous. Though several members had to be sedated before they could cast their ballots, Hana accepted the honor graciously and immediately began planning what she called team-building exercises for the new expanded council. She assured everyone that the activities would be perfectly safe and lots of fun. The screaming started again and continued for several days. The galaxy had learned a terrible truth. There were beings out there who had survived everything the universe could throw at them, and emerged not just intact but eager for more. The humans had arrived and nothing would ever be the same. In the depths of space, other species began to receive reports about the new council members. Some laughed at the idea of soft-looking humans joining the ultimate survivors. Others began to make plans to avoid human space entirely, but the wise ones, the ones who had survived long enough to recognize real danger when they saw it, began to send diplomatic gifts and friendship offerings. They understood that the galaxy now contained something unprecedented, something that made survival look easy. The humans, for their part, were delighted with their new friends and immediately began planning cultural exchange programs. They were excited to learn about new dangerous environments and share their own knowledge about extreme survival. The universe had become a much more interesting and terrifying place. The testing arena was a monument to suffering and death. Built deep beneath the council chambers, it combined the worst elements of every hellworld the council members had survived. The very air inside could kill most beings within minutes while the environment shifted between different types of deadly conditions without warning. Counselor Gorth stood before the massive viewing window that looked down into the arena. His rocky form cast long shadows as he spoke with grim satisfaction. Species has ever survived more than 1 hour in this environment, he announced to the assembled council. And that was with full environmental protection suits and emergency backup systems. The arena itself was a nightmare. Made real, acid rain fell from an artificial sky that crackled with deadly energy. The ground shifted constantly between crushing gravity that could flatten bones and weightlessness that could make blood vessels explode. Toxic gases swirled through the air in patterns designed to confuse and disorient while automated weapons fired projectiles at random intervals. The temperature changed every few minutes from freezing cold that could stop hearts to burning heat that could cook flesh. The very atmosphere was hostile too, life-containing gases that would dissolve lungs and particles that would shred internal organs. The lighting flickered between blinding brightness and total darkness, making it impossible to see dangers until they were too close to avoid. This environment has broken the strongest beings in the galaxy. Counselor Vexthara said, her crystal form dim with the memory of previous tests. We have seen warriors from the most violent worlds reduced to crying children within minutes. Even our own people cannot survive here without protection. The 3 humans who entered the arena wore simple clothing that looked like it might be appropriate for a casual walk in a park. Their only protection was basic breathing masks that filtered the worst of the toxic gases. They carried no weapons, no tools, no emergency equipment of any kind. Remember, Hana called to her companions as they stepped into the hellish environment. This is just a demonstration. Try not to have too much fun with it. The council members leaned forward in their seats, watching for the inevitable moment when the humans would realize their mistake and begin screaming for rescue. It usually happened within the first few minutes when the full horror of the environment became clear. Instead, something impossible happened. The humans began to adapt when the acid rain started falling. They quickly moved to analyze its patterns and composition. Within minutes, they had constructed a shelter using debris from the arena floor. Their movements were efficient and purposeful, as if they had done this many times before. When the gravity shifted to crushing levels, they adjusted their posture and breathing to compensate. When it changed to weightlessness, they used the walls and ceiling to maintain control of their movement. Their adaptation was so smooth it looked almost automatic. How are they doing this? Counselor Zephia whispered, her feathered form trembling with disbelief. They should be dead or dying, not building shelters and adapting to conditions that would kill our best warriors. Dr. Nexel studied his monitoring equipment with growing amazement. Their stress response systems are activating, but not in the way we expected. Their bodies are flooding with performance-enhancing chemicals, adrenaline, cortisol, endorphins. Their heart rates are elevated but stable. Their brain activity shows patterns associated with extreme focus and heightened awareness. When the automated weapons began firing projectiles, the humans' response was even more shocking. Instead of seeking cover or crying for help, they began to dodge the incoming fire with reflexes that seemed almost supernatural. Their movements were fluid, graceful, almost like they were dancing rather than fighting for their lives. Are they enjoying this? Vexthara asked in a voice filled with horror, as she watched the humans weave between deadly projectiles with what appeared to be smiles on their faces. The biometric readings confirm it, Clixandra said, her tentacles trembling as she read the data. Their brain chemistry shows patterns of pleasure and excitement, not fear and panic. They are not just surviving this environment. They are having fun. But it was what happened next that truly shattered the council's understanding of survival. The humans began to play. Jay started using the shifting gravity to perform acrobatic maneuvers that would have been impossible under normal conditions. He launched himself from wall to wall, using the weightless periods to spin and flip. Through the air, his laughter echoed through the arena as he turned the deadly environment into his personal playground. Sue began treating the projectile weapons like a game. She dodged the incoming fire in increasingly complex patterns, sometimes spinning, sometimes rolling, sometimes leaping over the deadly shots. Her movements became more elaborate as she gained confidence, turning survival into performance. Art Hana took charge of improving their shelter using the constantly changing conditions to make it stronger and more comfortable. She seemed to view each new environmental hazard as a puzzle to be solved, rather than a threat to be feared. They are not just surviving. Counselor Gorth said, his voice barely above a whisper. They are thriving. They are treating our ultimate test like a recreational activity. The 3 humans spent the next 4 hours in the arena that had broken the minds and bodies of countless other beings. They not only endured every deadly challenge, but they actively enjoyed it. They turned survival into entertainment, competition into cooperation, and mortal danger into a source of joy. When the arena threw everything it had at them simultaneously, they worked together with perfect coordination. Hana directed their movements while Jay used his acrobatic skills to scout safe paths, and Sue used her dodging abilities to clear obstacles from their route. They moved through the chaos like they had trained for it their entire lives. Their teamwork was flawless. Their adaptation instant, their response to danger so natural it seemed like breathing. When they finally emerged from the arena, they were barely breathing hard. Sweat covered their faces, but they were smiling and talking excitedly about the experience. That was refreshing, Hannah said as she wiped perspiration from her forehead. Thank you for the workout. It's been too long since we had access to a proper training facility. The council stared at her in absolute silence. Their ultimate test, the environment, designed to push the very limits of survival itself, had been dismissed as a workout routine. We have additional tests prepared, Counselor Gorth said weakly, his confidence completely shattered. Excellent, Jay replied with genuine enthusiasm. What comes next? We are just getting warmed up. The council members looked at each other with expressions of growing terror. They were beginning to understand that they had not invited survivors to join their ranks. They had invited something far more dangerous, something that made their own achievements look like the fumbling attempts of children. These humans were not just another Deathworld species. They were the ultimate expression of what Deathworld evolution could create. And they were just getting started. The emergency council session was called in the middle of the night cycle, when most beings would be resting. But none of the council members could rest after what they had learned. The great hall filled quickly as each member arrived, their usual confidence replaced by something that looked very much like fear. Counselor Vexthera took her place on the crystal throne, but her usual bright glow was dim, almost fearful. The other council members arranged themselves in their positions, but the atmosphere was different than usual. Instead of the proud bearing of ultimate survivors, they looked like beings who had discovered something that challenged their very understanding of existence. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, Vexthera began, her voice carrying none of its usual authority. What we have discovered about the human species goes beyond anything we thought possible about survival evolution. These beings are not what they appear to be. The main display activated, showing Earth in all its beauty. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents floating in the darkness of space. It looked peaceful, almost boring compared to the hell worlds that had forged the council members. Nothing about it suggested danger or death. This is the lie, Dr. Nexel announced, stepping forward, his scaled form trembling with barely controlled terror. What appears to be a garden world, a paradise where nothing dangerous could exist, is actually the most sophisticated death world any of us have ever encountered. The display changed, showing microscopic images that made several council members recoil. Tiny organisms that looked harmless but carried death in their very structure. Bacteria that could kill within hours. Viruses that could rewrite the genetic code of their victims, fungi that took control of minds before slowly consuming their hosts from the inside. Every breath humans take contains thousands of potential death sentences. Nexel continued, his voice growing stronger as he warmed to his terrible subject. The air on Earth is filled with organisms designed to kill. Any other species would die within minutes of breathing their atmosphere. Counselor Gorth leaned forward, his massive bulk casting shadows across the display. But surely they have developed immunity to these organisms. All species adapt to their local microbes. That is exactly the problem, Clixandra said, joining Nexel at the front of the chamber. They have not just adapted, they have weaponized their own immune systems. Human immune systems are so aggressive, so violent that without constant warfare against hostile organisms, they turn on their own bodies and destroy them from within. The display shifted to show human plants and animals. Every image was more disturbing than the last trees that could kill with a single touch. Animals that had evolved dozens of different ways to deliver poison, insects that could cause death with a single bite. Fish that could paralyze with their venom. But the humans do not avoid these deadly organisms, Clixandra continued. They interact with them regularly. They keep poisonous animals as pets. They eat plants that would kill most species. They swim in waters filled with creatures that could end their lives in seconds. Council members began to make sounds of distress. Their understanding of survival was being turned upside down. No sane species would willingly expose themselves to such dangers. The weather patterns on Earth are equally deadly, Nexel said as the display showed massive storms, hurricanes that can level entire cities, tornadoes that can tear apart anything in their path, floods that can drown whole regions, droughts that can kill everything for thousands of miles, and the humans' response to These deadly weather patterns, Clixandra asked rhetorically. They build their cities directly in the paths of these storms. They live on coastlines that are regularly destroyed by hurricanes. They farm in areas that flood every few years. They treat these deadly natural disasters as minor inconveniences. Counselor Zephia spoke up, her voice crackling like fire. Surely their young are protected from these dangers? All civilized species keep their children safe until they are strong enough to face the world. The display changed to show human children, and what it revealed made the entire council fall silent. Young humans climbing impossibly high trees, swimming in deep, dangerous waters, exploring dark caves where anything could be hiding, playing with animals that could easily kill them. Human parents encourage this behavior. Nexel said, his voice barely above a whisper. They believe that exposing their young to danger makes them stronger. They want their children to face risks, to get hurt, to learn through pain and fear. The chamber erupted in sounds of horror. No species deliberately exposed their young to mortal danger. It violated every instinct, every law of survival that had guided evolution for billions of years. But this is not the worst part, Clixandra said, and her words made the horrified sound stop immediately. The geological activity on Earth is beyond anything we have seen. Earthquakes that can split continents, volcanic eruptions that can change the climate for years, tectonic shifts that reshape entire landmasses. The display showed images of massive volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for months, earthquakes that opened chasms miles deep, mountain ranges being born in days through violent upheavals of the Earth's crust. And throughout all of this, Nexel continued, the humans not only survived, they thrived. They used these catastrophes to spread to new areas. They turned disasters into opportunities. They made the violence of their planet into a tool for expansion. The display changed again, showing human history wars that lasted for generations, weapons that could destroy entire cities, technologies of death that could end all life on their planet, conflicts that killed millions but somehow made the survivors stronger. When they were not fighting their planet, they were fighting each other. Clixandra said, they have been at war with themselves for their entire recorded history. They developed weapons that could destroy their world, then somehow managed not to use them. But here is what truly terrifies us, Nexel said, his voice dropping to barely audible levels. They did not just survive all of this. They learned to enjoy it. They turned survival into competition. They made games out of deadly situations. They created entertainment from mortal danger. The council sat in stunned silence as the full implications of what they were hearing began to sink in. These were not just another Deathworld species. These were beings that had turned survival itself into an art form. What we are looking at, Dr. Nexel said slowly, is not a species that survived a Deathworld. What we are seeing is a species that became the apex predator of the most sophisticated Deathworld in known existence. They are not survivors. They are the thing that survival itself evolved to create. The silence that followed was broken by the quiet sound of several council members activating their personal defense systems. For the first time in their long, violent lives, they felt truly afraid. These humans with their soft appearance and friendly smiles were something beyond their understanding, something that made their own survival achievements look like child's play, something that suggested the universe had been preparing for far worse dangers than any of them had ever imagined, and they were just beginning to understand what humanity really was. The examination facility was a place of nightmares made real. Its corridors stretched for miles underground, filled with the most advanced testing equipment the galaxy had ever created. The walls hummed with power that could analyze any form of life down to its smallest parts. Everything here was designed to find the limits of survival and then push beyond them. Chief Researcher Clixandra moved through the facility on her many tentacles, each one equipped with sensors that could detect things most beings never knew existed. She had examined thousands of species over the centuries, testing their bodies, their minds, their very souls to see if they were worthy of joining the council. Her work had exposed the secrets of survival itself. Today, she was confused. The first human volunteer sat quietly on the examination table, looking around the room with what appeared to be curiosity, rather than the terror most beings showed when they saw her equipment. Tay was his name, and he seemed completely relaxed despite being surrounded by machines that could take him apart, molecule by molecule. The first scans made Clixandra check her instruments twice, then 3 times. The readings could not be correct. No species could have a cardiovascular system. Like this, the human heart was a marvel of engineering that should not have been possible in such a small, soft body. "Your heart," she said to Tay, trying to keep the amazement out of her voice. "It can increase its power by more than 3 times when needed. Your blood carries oxygen better than species from worlds with thin air. How is this possible?" Ty shrugged like it was nothing special. "My grandmother used to run long distances for fun," she said. "She told me humans were built for traveling, far without stopping. She could run for hours without getting tired." Clixandra stared at him. A marathon, according to her data, was over 26 miles of continuous running. People did this for enjoyment, not for survival, not to escape predators, but because they found it fun. The very idea made her tentacles curl with confusion. The bone density readings were equally shocking. Human bones were not just strong, they were constantly rebuilding themselves. The more stress they faced, the stronger they became. It was like they had armor that grew tougher with every battle. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Your bones become harder when they are damaged. They repair themselves and come back stronger than before. It's like your body expects to be hurt and prepares for worse damage." Tay nodded happily. "Yeah, broken bones heal back stronger than they were before. My sister Mira broke her arm 3 times when we were kids. Now that arm is actually stronger than her other one. She jokes that she should break the other arm to match." The researcher felt something like fear creeping into her mind. No species evolved bones that got stronger from being broken. That suggested a life of constant injury, constant healing, constant adaptation to violence. But it was the brain scans that truly alarmed her. The human brain was constantly flooding itself with chemicals that would be considered dangerous drugs in most species. Adrenaline that could stop hearts, dopamine that could cause permanent addiction, serotonin that could trigger psychotic episodes. Yet humans not only tolerated this chemical cocktail, they seemed to need it. "Tell me about human fun activities," she said, trying to sound casual, while her tentacles danced nervously over the controls. Tay's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "Oh, there are so many great things to do. Some people like to jump out of flying machines with just a piece of cloth to slow them down. Others climb straight up rock walls with no safety equipment. My friend Jinho loves to ride ocean waves that are taller than buildings." Each activity he described sounded like a form of suicide to Clixandra. Yet humans did these things regularly. They sought out danger on purpose. They paid money to risk their lives they considered mortal peril to be entertainment. "What about when you're not trying to kill yourselves?" she asked weakly. "We have sports," Tay said cheerfully. "Football where people crash into each other at high speed, hockey where people on ice hit a hard disc with sticks while trying to knock each other down, boxing where 2 people punch each other until one falls down, rugby where 30 people fight over a ball, like it was the last food in the universe. Every human recreational activity seemed designed to cause injury." Clixandra realized these beings had turned violence into games. They had made competition out of combat. They played at war for fun and children. She asked, dreading the answer. "How do human young spend their time?" Tay laughed. "They climb trees, swim in deep water, explore caves, catch dangerous animals, build forts in high places. The more dangerous it is, the more fun they think it is. Parents worry when their kids are too safe. They want them to take risks to get hurt a little so they learn to be careful." Clixandra felt her worldview cracking. Human parents encourage their children to face danger. They wanted their young to be injured as part of normal development. The very concept violated everything she knew about child rearing. Dr. Nexel burst through the door, his scaled form trembling with excitement and terror. "Clixandra, you need to see the psychological profiles immediately, and the historical data they provided. This species is not what we thought." "What did you find?" she asked, though. Part of her no longer wanted to know. Nexel activated the main display showing images from human history wars that lasted for years, covering entire continents. Weapons that could destroy whole cities. Conflicts that killed millions of people. And through it all, humans kept fighting, kept surviving, kept growing stronger. But that's not the worst part, he said, his voice shaking. They fight their own planet. Earth itself tries to kill them regularly. Ice ages that last thousands of years. Volcanic eruptions that block out the sun, earthquakes that split continents, storms that level cities, and the humans just adapt. They survive, they rebuild, they keep going. The display showed more images. Humans living in frozen wastelands where the cold could kill in minutes. Humans in burning deserts where the heat could cook flesh. Humans underwater in crushing depths. Humans on mountaintops where there was barely any air to breathe. They spread across their entire planet. Nexel continued even into places where nothing should be able to live. They didn't just survive these places. They made homes there. They raised families in environments that would kill most of our council members. Clixandra looked at Tai, who was still sitting patiently on the examination table. He smiled at her, and somehow that simple expression was more terrifying than any threat she had ever faced. "Is there anything else you need to know?" he asked politely. She realized that everything she thought she knew about survival, about evolution, about life itself might be wrong. These soft-looking humans might be the most dangerous beings she had ever encountered. They just hid it behind friendly smiles and casual conversation. The examination was far from over. But already Clixandra knew that the council was about to face something that would challenge everything they believed about what it meant to be survivors in a hostile galaxy. These humans were not like other species. They were something, knew something that evolution had been building toward for millions of years. Something that turned survival itself into an art form, and they were just getting started. The great hall of the Galactic Council of Deathworld survivors stretched far beyond what most eyes could see. Its walls were made from the hardest materials in the galaxy, materials that had survived the worst conditions any planet could throw. At them, the ceiling disappeared into darkness above, while strange lights flickered and danced, creating shadows that moved like living things. In the center of this massive space sat the council members. Each one was a living proof of survival against impossible odds. They came from worlds where normal beings would die in seconds just from breathing the air. Their bodies showed the marks of their struggles, scars that told stories of battles against nature itself. Counselor Vexthara sat on her crystal throne. Her body was made of what looked like living glass that changed colors as she moved. She came from Meltos Prime, where acid rain fell every day for thousands of years. The air on her world could melt metal, but her people had learned to live with it. Their skin became like crystal to protect them from the burning atmosphere. Next to her was Counselor Gorth, a massive creature that looked like a mountain with eyes. His people lived deep inside a gas giant, where the pressure could crush diamonds. The storms on his world lasted for centuries, and the winds could tear apart starships. Yet his people had survived and grown strong. Counselor Zephia looked like a bird made of fire. Her feathers glowed with heat that could burn through steel. She came from a world covered in active volcanoes where the ground was always moving, and lava flows were as common as rivers. The air was filled with ash and toxic gases, but her people had learned to fly above the danger. These were the elite, survivors of the galaxy, the ones who had faced the worst conditions possible and lived to tell about it. For thousands of years, they had tested other species to see who could join their exclusive group. Most species failed. Most died just trying. To prove they were worthy, today something different was happening. 5 strange creatures stood in the center of the great hall waiting to be judged. They looked soft and weak, with pale pink skin that seemed too thin to protect them from anything dangerous. They had no claws, no natural armor, no obvious weapons. Their bodies looked like they would break if someone looked at them too hard. The leader of these strange beings was a female who called herself Hana. She stood straight and tall even, though she was surrounded by creatures that could kill her without trying. Her eyes were calm and she showed no fear, even though any smart being would be terrified in this place. Behind her stood 4 others. A male named Tay, who kept looking around the hall with what seemed like curiosity rather than fear. A female named Mira, who actually appeared to be smiling. A male named Jay, who stood with his arms crossed, looking almost bored, and another female named Yoon, who was quietly studying each council member like she was trying to figure out how they worked. Counselor Vexthara leaned forward on her crystal throne, making sounds like wind chimes in a storm. Her voice echoed through the hall, carrying the authority of someone who had survived, things that would give nightmares to most beings. "You claim to come from a world called Earth," she said. Her voice had an edge to it like broken glass. "These humans believe they deserve to join our council of survivors. They think their soft, weak bodies have survived conditions worthy of our respect." The other council members made sounds that might have been laughter if they came from normal beings. Counselor Gorth rumbled like an earthquake, while Counselor Zephia made crackling sounds like a forest fire. The idea that these fragile-looking creatures could be Deathworld survivors was almost funny. The council had examined the data about Earth and found it puzzling. The planet seemed almost perfect for life. The temperature was mild, most of the time. The atmosphere was mostly harmless gases. The gravity was so weak that the humans probably floated around like feathers. There were no constant acid storms, no crushing pressure, no deadly radiation that would cook them from the inside. Hana stepped forward, and her voice carried clearly through the massive hall. "We understand your doubts, honored counselors. Our world may not look dangerous to beings who have survived true hell worlds, but we believe that appearances can be deceiving. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves through your examination process." Counselor Gorth made a sound like boulders grinding together. "The examination process has broken the minds of creatures far stronger than you, small human. Most species that try to join us end up fleeing back to their safe worlds crying for their parents. Are you certain you wish to face what we will show you?" The human named Jay actually laughed. It was a sound that somehow made several council members uncomfortable. There was something in that laugh that did not match his weak appearance. Something that suggested hidden depths that might be dangerous to explore. "We are certain," he said, looking directly at Counselor Gorth. "We have traveled very far to be here. We would not waste your time or ours if we were not ready for whatever tests you have prepared." Counselor Zephia tilted her burning head, studying the humans with eyes that glowed like coals. "Your planet shows no signs of the struggles that forge true survivors," she said. "Your people have not faced the trials that make beings strong. What makes you think you belong among us?" The human named Mira spoke up for the first time. Her voice was cheerful, almost musical, which seemed completely wrong for this dark, serious place. "Our world has taught us many things about survival. We have learned to adapt, to overcome, to endure. We may not look like much, but we are tougher than we appear." The council members exchanged glances that managed to communicate volumes. Without words, they had heard such claims before. Weak species often thought they were stronger than they really were. It usually ended badly for them. "Very well said, Counselor Vexthara, rising from her crystal throne. The examination will begin immediately. You will be tested in every way possible. Your bodies will be pushed beyond their limits, your minds will face horrors that have driven others to madness, your spirits will be challenged by despair that has broken the strongest wills." She paused, letting her words sink in. Many species flee at this point when they realize what they have asked for. If you wish to leave now, there will be no shame in it. Wisdom often means knowing when you are outmatched. The 5 humans looked at each other, and something passed between them, some kind of silent communication that the council members could not interpret. When they turned back to face the council, their expressions had not changed. They still showed no fear. No doubt. No second thoughts. "We are ready," said Hana simply. "We welcome your examination. We believe you will find humanity quite interesting." Something in the way she said those words made Counselor Vexthara pause. The crystal being had survived things that would destroy entire civilizations. She had faced down creatures that could eat starships and weather, that could strip flesh from bones. But something about this small, soft human made her feel uneasy. The examination chambers were prepared, the most advanced testing facilities in the galaxy. were activated machines that could analyze every cell. Every thought, every instinct were brought online. The council settled in to watch what they expected to be the shortest examination in their long history. They had no idea they were about to discover something that would shake their understanding of survival itself. Something that would make them question everything they thought they knew about what it meant to be the ultimate survivors in a dangerous galaxy. Something that would eventually make them scream in terror at the truth about humanity.